Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Friday edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. We're taking you into your weekend here. Mary Kay and Ashley, of course, still off this week. I'm going to be off next week, but we've got lots of pods coming your way. Some really good ones coming next week on the Orange and Brown Talk. Some Strictly Stripes crossovers. Some fun stuff coming your way next week. But it is Friday, and Doug Lesmerises is here, and it's been a while since we've talked gambling. Doug, I've learned something about myself here over these last few months. I've dabbled a little bit in gambling on the NBA, dabbled a little in baseball. That's just, I don't know why anybody does that. Too random. Football, there's just something different about football. I miss gambling on football. I don't know if that's a me problem. I don't know if that's like, if I should call that number at the bottom of the post. I don't know. But I just miss it. I love it.
It's not a you problem. It's why it's America's sport, man. Like it is built. It is built for this. And I, dabbled a little bit in the NBA playoffs. I don't do baseball at all. And I was like, I'm just going to not look at my betting app on my phone for 3 months. And then you were like, hey, let's do a gambling pod. And I looked at it. It was like, oh, there's some old feelings coming back up that I don't know what to do with. And there are so many NFL bets out there now on individual players, on teams, on win totals, on division finish. There are so many ways to bet your team that it's overwhelming. But I think it's a reminder, Dan. We talked about gambling before it was legal in Ohio. It's just a different world. Now it's just it's real. It's not theoretical. And then the options available to you, we'll get into this more. I just still want people, it's a great way. Gambling talk is a great way to get a read on your team, even if you're not interested in gambling, even if you would never bet. If you're against betting, I think you can listen to us and still learn about the Browns. But then the other thing is chill out, man. It's there's 148 different bets you could make on the Browns on the app. And it's don't go make all of them.
True. And I think one of the things as I was going through this is there's some ridiculous, every bet that I'm going to throw out, I'm going to at least make the case as to why it can hit. As to why there's a chance that I like it, whether it's an over-under, whether it's a player winning an award. There's a reason I believe it could happen. Now, it could be a long shot. It could be something that in the end I may not have any interest in actually putting real money on, but these are bets that I can at least make the case for. So let's start with the Browns because they are, I think, the most interesting team in the NFL from maybe the most interesting team in the NFL in general. But certainly from a gambling perspective, because the ceiling on this team is so high. And the floor is not 3 wins low, but it's 7 or 8 wins low. The floor is low. So I think the Browns are maybe the most interesting team and the hardest team to read, but maybe also have the biggest upside. So let's just throw out some Browns bets that we found. Doug, what's the first one you want to talk about?
All right, it's going to be complicated, but the thing that I try to do, that I try to remind myself of, and I'm bad at it, is I think the worst thing that can happen with gambling, that's a pot in and of itself. It's very frustrating to me when I feel like I'm right about the opinion, but I'm wrong on the bet. And it's I thought this would happen. I thought this team would win. I thought this team was much better. Everybody else liked this team. I like this team. But I still lost the bet because I bet it wrong. So I have a bet that I think is a way to try to make some money. And I hope it's the right kind of bet, because if you're just looking at Browns win totals, there's one of the things you noted, Dan, and I didn't realize this until I looked, is they have all kinds of different win totals for the Browns on the gambling.
Yeah. So I'll note that I was using DraftKings, and DraftKings has 4 different win totals for every team.
That's also what I was using. And so if you bet over 7.5 wins for the Browns, that's minus 250, which means if you bet $25, you only win 10. It's okay, well, do you think they're going to be 8 and 9 or better? It's I don't know. You might have a real good feeling about that, but you don't win that much. You're really minus 250 is a terrible number. Then over 9.5 is plus 115. So you get a little better than even money, for them to, but then if they go 9-8, you lose. They might go 9-8 and make the playoffs and you lose your bet. So we're talking about you want to make the right bet to fit what you think. So here's my answer. They also have win totals for all the teams, specific wins, exact numbers. So this is my bet for you. Bet whatever you bet. I say $5. If you want to bet $2, if you want to bet $50, whatever. On these three things, the Browns to win 9 games, the Browns to win 10 games, and the Browns to win 11 games. So if you bet $5 on each of those things, you would outlay 15. If they win 9 games exactly for your bet, you'll get 30 back. So you'd bet 5, they're plus 500, you'd get $30 back. If they win 10 games, they're plus 600, you'd get $35 back. And if they win 11 games, they're plus 700, you'll get $40 back. So if you put 3 bets out there, you're outlaying 15. If they win 9, 10, or 11 games, you'll win between $30 and $40. You'll at least double your money. Now, if they win fewer than 9 games, if they win 8 games or less, they're probably not going to make the playoffs, and you're going to be mad about things other than losing $15, right? So that's the thing. It's like you're going to be mad. So you won't be so mad about the loss. And if they win 12 games or more, you'll be so happy, you won't care that you didn't win $15 because you'll be like, I think the Browns are going to the Super Bowl. So this is you think the Browns are going to be good and a chance to double your money bet. Because I think for them to hit on 9, 10, or 11 wins, I think there's a pretty decent chance of that. And I'm trying to get there, I don't want you to bet the 7.5 over, but barely win any money. And I don't want you to bet the 9.5 over and then lose if they go 9-8. So this is my solution, Dan. It's a lot of betting talk, but don't you think this is not football talk, this is betting talk. Don't you think there's a what would you in your mind put the chance of the Browns winning 9, 10, or 11 games as their final record? Like 2/3 chance that's where they wind up?
Yeah, I mean, I would think that there's no way they're going to go under 7.5, right? That's the lowest. So if they went 7-10, that's not going to happen. And like you said, if you think they're going to go 8-9, you're minus 250. You don't want to do that. And then this is where these gambling sites get you, right? They don't give you an option for 8.5. They're not going to let you, not for the Browns at least. They're not giving you an option for 8.5. They're saying, no, we're not going to let you say they're going to win 9 games. They're basically telling you they think this team is going to go 9-8, basically. That's sort of what DraftKings here is predicting with these odds. So yeah, I think that's a good approach, is find those win totals and figure out a way to get money on all of them, on all 3 of them. I think that's a good way to do it. Now, I'm going to give you an alternative here, though, and this is one way that I've sort of been thinking about it. If you really if you're looking for that value, right, and those over-under numbers don't do a lot for you. So let's say, like if you took the Browns over 9.5, that's plus 115. Okay. That's okay. That's fine. You'll make money off that if they win 10 games. But if you believe the Browns are going to win at least 9.5 games, doesn't that also put them in the discussion for the AFC North? If they're a 10 or 11 win team, that could win the AFC North. A 12 win team could win the AFC North. So if you're bullish on the Browns, they're plus 425 to win the division.
Yeah.
Which, if you're looking at those win totals and you're like, well, I think they're going to win, like over 11.5 is plus 370. If you think the Browns are going to win more than 11.5 games, don't bet the over. Bet them to win the North.
Okay, so this is where I differ on this, because when you're betting on something like the division, you're actually betting on 4 different things. You're betting on the Browns, but you're also betting on the Bengals, the Steelers, and the Ravens. And so this is where I find myself getting in trouble. If you think the Browns are going to be good, what if the Bengals go 14-3 and the Browns go 12-5? And you're like, I was right. The Browns are awesome. But you put a bunch of your money on the Browns to win the division, and they don't win the division. And it's not about your opinion on the Browns was correct, but you lost the bet. I am sometimes with my thinking, trying to narrow it down. What am I betting on? I'm just betting on the Browns win total. They're in control of that. They're not in control of how good the Bengals are. Oh my gosh, Kenny Pickett went nuts. The Steelers are better than anybody imagined, right? So I know what you're saying, but some of that, I feel like I myself have gotten in trouble with that before, where I thought a team's going to be good or a team's going to be bad. That opinion was correct, but the bet was wrong because something else happened that I didn't anticipate. So I might rather bet the Browns to win 12 games than the Browns to win the division, because there's a world where they could win 12 games and not win the division if the Bengals go nuts.
That's fair. These division odds are interesting. The Bengals are the favorite at plus 150, which I'm looking here. I think that's actually, as far as division favorites, that's the worst that you can find out there, is, the lowest. So like the Bills are a plus 120, which I believe is I'm just scrolling through the app here live on the podcast. That's all. The Lions are plus 130. So the Bengals are plus 150. There's not a lot of confidence there compared to some of the other division favorites. The Ravens are plus 220 and the Browns are plus 425, which is a lower number than the Dolphins, who are third to win the East. That's the same as the Bears, who are third to win the North. That's lower than the Panthers, who are the third to win the South. Should the Browns and Ravens be that separated? I mean, I don't want to. I haven't figured out how good I'm feeling about this team just yet. I'm not ready to sit here and say that. I'm not going to predict the Browns to win the AFC North. That's probably not a bet I would put right now on July 7th. But I'm just saying, like, are the Browns at plus 425 and the Ravens at plus 220? Is there really that much separation between those two teams?
No,
if Deshaun Watson is close to what we think he can be?
Because they're both in the same thing, where you're counting on what version of the very good quarterback are you getting? Are you getting the best version of Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson? Are you getting a faded version? Are you getting a version that you have to fear something goes wrong and they miss some games? So I don't think they should be that separated, which leads me to a division bet that I did kind of find interesting, and I don't know if Browns fans would stomach this or not. I'm going to ask you a question, Dan, and I should have a handle on this, and I don't. What is the order of magnitude of how much Browns fans hate the other teams in the division? And if we can we do it on a scale of 1 to 10? That, okay, they like the 10 is the greatest hate. 1 is not very much hate at all. What is their level of hate for Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and Cincinnati?
Okay. Level of hate. See, actually, it was funny. We were having this discussion during the season, literally in the Browns locker room. And a longtime player was kind of chatting with us about it too. But he didn't really make it clear, though, what his feelings were, unfortunately. But I still think the Steelers are the top. I think they're a 10.
Okay.
Like
that's Browns, what I would guess. That's what I would guess too.
Browns fans still hate Steelers fans. To hate the Steelers, hate Steelers fans. They took just so much joy in that playoff win. I think there's still a lot of hatred there. I think the Ravens are probably, they're high. Maybe a 7.5 or an 8. 7.5 feels low now that I said it out loud, so I'm going to say 8. My dog agrees with me. But I also have a theory that the Ravens should be in the AFC East and the Bills should be in the AFC North. But that's another podcast. The Bengals, I don't know if Browns fans hate the Bengals. I think that's like a 5. I think that's really lukewarm right now. Now that changes if the Browns are really good and they have like 2 or 3 years here where it's just battling with the Bengals for the division and they meet in the playoffs a few times. But I feel like the Battle of Ohio is pretty lukewarm.
Okay. That's what I thought too, which opened us up to this bet. You can bet so many things. You can bet division combinations. So you can bet either the Bengals to win the division and the Browns to finish second in that order. That's plus 450. That's pretty good odds. Or you can just bet the Bengals and the Browns to take the top 2 spots. And that's plus 250. So that could be, all right. So like, again, you don't want to wind up, if you're a Browns fan, you don't want to like wind up rooting for the Browns to lose so the Bengals can win the division and the Browns can finish second so you can win your bet. But this way, they're just top 2. That's plus 250. which I think is a pretty good chance of happening. And this folds in some of I think the Browns are going to be good, but I'm also anticipating the Bengals are going to be good. And I don't want the Bengals being so good to screw up my Browns bet. Plus 250 for them to be the top two teams in the division. As long as you don't hate the Bengals more than you hate the Ravens and the Steelers, this is a way to bet on the Browns, root against the Steelers and the Ravens all year, and, be okay with the Bengals being good, because guess what? The Bengals are good. So I kind of like that version of it. I think I'd probably take the one that's plus 250, them to be in the top two spots in either order.
So yeah, that's an interesting one, and that's safer, obviously, than the Browns to win the division roll of the dice you'd be taking. Now, of course, that's why the odds aren't as good, right? The upside of the Browns winning the division is so much higher than that one. But I didn't see that one. That's an interesting one. So the Browns and Bengals, they can finish in any order. They just have to be 1-2.
Right. And if you really think, I don't think I didn't look what the Browns 1, Bengals 2 would be. Because again, if you're so locked in, I think if you are sure the Browns are going to win the division, then just bet the Browns to win the division. Because now you don't want to bet. My bet is Browns first, Bengals second. I love those odds, but Joe Burrow gets hurt. And now the Browns won the division, but the Bengals finished third, and you lost your bet. And you were right. The Browns were great. You were right. But you lost your bet. So you're looping the Bengals in a little bit here. But I think you have to assume, the odds are telling you this. The odds are assuming the Bengals are going to be better than the Browns. So if you're going to loop them together, either to go Bengals 1, Browns 2, or just go top 2 in any order. Top 2 in any order is plus 250. Bengals 1, Browns 2 is plus 450.
This is where I will remind everyone that Kevin Stefanski has never finished better than third in the AFC North. So maybe this is the year. I do like the Ravens. I like, we rave about John Harbaugh all the time. It's hard for me to bet against the Ravens. It really is. And some of it is just that psychology of like, am I really going to say that the Browns can finish first or second in the division? Because it just never happens. But it is hard for me to just say the Ravens are going to be the third best team in the North. I just think they're so well run. They're so well coached. Lamar Jackson has the contract out of the way. That weirdness seems to be gone. But also, I don't know, are we sure Todd Monken is going to be a good coordinator in the NFL? I know, Doug, you talked to him back when Georgia was playing Ohio State, and wrote that big story on him. Like, Todd Monken was really good in college. He had some chances in the NFL. Are we sure? Like, are we absolutely sure that's going to work?
I think part of it is because, and I do not mean this in a negative way at all, Lamar Jackson's kind of like a college quarterback. That like they're not doing like old school drop back. Like they're going to use tight ends. They're going to use multiple backs. They're going to move guys around. I think what they're going to try to do with Baltimore and Lamar Jackson is not all that dissimilar from what they did with Stetson Bennett and Brock Bowers and 3 good backs and like good receivers, but not great receivers at Georgia. So I do think Monk can work. So again, this is a bet on the Bengals and Browns. I don't know that I'd be betting against the Ravens right now, but this is just believing that you think you have 2 good teams in Ohio.
Okay, so that's interesting. I want to talk about the two big awards and sort of where, and I'm not talking about MVP here, but I'm talking about the Offensive Player of the Year and the Defensive Player of the Year award. Now, Defensive Player of the Year, we talked about that on Thursday's podcast. Myles Garrett is plus 750, which is kind of, look, if Micah Parsons wins Defensive Player of the Year, he's plus 650. He's the favorite. Like you're going to make money on that. But these awards are tough. You just never know what's going to happen. Myles is plus 750. There's actually somebody else that I would bet here. We can get into that. But he's actually number 2 on DraftKings as their favorites. But there's another one. And again, these aren't necessarily bets I would make, but these are just things I'm circling, like with really good odds, really high upside, that I can make a case it could happen. Your Offensive Player of the Year favorite is Justin Jefferson at plus 1,000. There's Jamar Chase at plus 1,000. Christian McCaffrey at plus 1,300. And as you kind of scroll down a little bit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th on this list is one Mr. Nick Chubb.
Oh,
plus 2,200. Now, Do I think Nick Chubb is going to win the Offensive Player of the Year in the NFL? No. But can I lay out a scenario where Nick Chubb wins Offensive Player of the Year in the NFL? That involves him leading the league in rushing for a team that's really good, and also adding, let's say, 500 receiving yards. Because he will be more involved in the passing game now. That would be a big jump up in receiving yards for Nick Chubb to 400 or 500 yards. But if he is more involved in the passing game, if he leads the league in rushing, if the Browns' offense is good, is there a case for Nick Chubb for Offensive Player of the Year over the likes of Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill? I don't feel great about it, but it's
They have to be good. The Browns have to be good.
They have to be really good. And maybe Nick Chubb has to rush for 2,000 yards.
I thought you were going to make that case for Deshaun Watson. I was going to say I don't think people will vote for him.
No, and part of that is because Offensive Player of the Year is mostly because nobody except the quarterback can win MVP. That's usually where voters will stick in a receiver or a running back. Or there are some quarterback odds on here, but.
So I think that's smart. So I have some Chubb stuff. And I think, to me, again, if you're going to go something where there's a vote, I would tie some statistical things to that. Because as you said, well, what does it look like if Nick Chubb wins that award? Well, he's got to have a great year, bottom line. And he might have to lead the league in rushing. So I would make winning Offensive Player of the Year your bonus bet, your big hit on top of those. His over-under on rushing yards is 1,225.5. He's been over that every healthy year he's had. It's minus 110 to take that over. It's close to even odds. I'd bet that. I think that's just him being healthy, right? 1,226 rushing yards.
There was a season, maybe it was last season, I don't remember, where we looked at some over-unders, and his total was really low. It felt really low, and this feels the same way. If Nick Chubb is healthy, he's going to get over 1,200 rushing yards.
So you're just betting on that. You're betting on healthy Nick Chubb. So I would make the Nick Chubb over-under on that rushing total bet, and then it's like, okay, if he's healthy, I feel good about winning that. And then I'll take my winnings, my presumed winnings on that, and bet that on the Offensive Player of the Year thing, right? Or that kind of thing. Now, to win the rushing title, which is, you don't have to sit around and wait for sports writers to make a vote, plus 450. That's actually not great odds, right? I mean, you win the rushing title, plus 450. I think he's the favorite. But if you think he's going to be great, at least you control that. And as you mentioned on a pod the other day, Dan, Freddie Kitchens didn't try to get Nick Chubb a rushing title a couple years ago in 2019. Maybe the Browns would try to get Nick Chubb a rushing title this year. In a world where Kareem Hunt's not around, then they're going to throw the ball a lot. And Mary Kay said maybe they're going to throw the ball to Nick Chubb. Do you still think you're bet against? Maybe Derrick Henry has a couple injury things. Jonathan Taylor, how good are the Colts going to actually be? Maybe you sprinkle a little bit on the over-under, you sprinkle a little bit on the rushing title at plus 450, and then you take a shot at Offensive Player of the Year. But again, I would ride a little bit with the statistical stuff where you have more control and you're not leaving it up to, man, Nick Chubb had a great Offensive Player of the Year case, but Jamar Chase had 2,100 receiving yards and he won.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at some of these other names. I mean, I would actually, if you made me choose between the two, sitting at plus 2,000, there's Austin Eckler. So there's another running back. I would certainly pick him probably over Chubb. Look, Christian McCaffrey at plus 1,300. He's third. That's probably the pick. But I'm just saying, there could be a case if you wanted to just take a little tiny bit, high upside bet. This was sort of like when I made the case for Travis Kelce to win Super Bowl MVP. It usually goes to a quarterback, but if you're looking for some high upside, maybe, and we're talking Brown-centric here, just maybe Nick Chubb could be a bet there. I have a couple other Brown-centric ones. Do you have anything good? Do you have anything for Deshaun Watson? I actually have a couple that I really like for Deshaun Watson.
I don't have for Deshaun Watson. Can we do Myles Garrett quick, though?
Yes. Yeah, let's do it.
Because I did, in talking about, again, how do you go about this? He's plus 750 for Defensive Player of the Year. He's plus 650 to have the most sacks. So he might have the most. I think, is this a fair thing? In order for him to win Defensive Player of the Year, I think he has to have the most sacks. But
Probably.
I think he could have the most sacks and not win Defensive Player of the Year. Because what if he has the most sacks, but the Browns are 8-9, and somebody who's close to him in sacks plays for a better team? So the difference of plus 650 to plus 750, you get a little slightly better odds on Defensive Player of the Year. I'd bet the stats. And so the last 3 years combined, he has the most sacks in the NFL. So plus 650 to have the most sacks this year in Jim Schwartz's system where people think he's going to thrive, I would not leave it up to voters. I would not leave it up to team success giving him a boost. But plus 650 to just flat out be the sack leader, I kind of like that one, Dan. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. That is one that sort of goes in the category kind of similar to the division thing where you are sort of like you're betting on just TJ Watt also not having as monster a year. You are kind of betting on like a Nick Bosa, somebody like that, not kind of matching Miles's production. But that's a good one, especially because I think, the thing Miles is fighting against is the Browns aren't on prime time a lot this year. They don't have those national games. I said this on a pod we did a couple weeks ago. Like sometimes part of winning these awards, as stupid as it sounds, is just like everybody seeing the tweets every single week that are like, oh my God, Myles Garrett just did this. Or did you see what TJ Watt, like that's part of it because these are human beings voting on these awards. And so, yeah, I think that's a good one because Myles Garrett to win DPOY is plus 750. It's not like the odds of that are that much better than just winning the sack title. And if Myles is healthy and can stay on the field, he's shown he can produce, enough sacks to win that title.
Yeah, so I actually think that's a pretty decent statistical bet. Can I give you one other weird one before we get to Watson, which is good? Your Watson stuff is good. This one's weird.
Yeah.
They have lines for like every game, Dan. Like, out already. So I was going through the individual lines for games, and the NFL lines are always close. But the first like 7 weeks for the Browns, they're plus 2.5 against the Bengals at home in the opener. They're plus 1 at Pittsburgh in week 2. Anyway, the one that I like, that I think it's like, why would you bet on an individual game in July? The Browns are -3 at Indianapolis on October 22nd, and this makes me sound like a lunatic. It's like you're betting on an individual late October game in July. I think the Colts are like going to be playing Anthony Richardson and figuring it out, and Michael Pittman got suspended. Like, I think the Colts are going to be terrible. And I think the Browns are going to be pretty decent. And the Browns, the last time they were good, when they made the playoffs, they were 5-3 on the road that year. So I think they'll win some road games this year. So they're only a 3-point favorite at Indianapolis. I think by the time we get to that game, the Browns might be good enough. The Colts might be enough of a mess that line might be 7.5. And if you can lock that down now, it's like, do you think the Browns will beat the Colts by a field goal in October? I know it's crazy, but I was trying to look for like, what's like an obvious thing that's staring you in the face. The next week they're at Seattle and they're +2. And it's like, is Seattle going to duplicate it with Geno Smith again? I don't know that. Are they really going to be? So I'm looking for some road games because the Browns, if they're going to be good, they're going to have to win some road games. And maybe you can get them on some numbers now that as we get into the season, if the Browns start off pretty good, and again, they have a heavy home slate early, those lines are going to move. But I really do like -3 Browns at Indianapolis on October 22nd, and I think I am officially a degenerate.
I will not comment on that bet. I'm honestly, I'm so bad at point spread, but I am so bad. I overthink point spreads. Now live spreads, when I'm sitting there watching a game, sometimes I can kind of, that's kind of where you can, if you're on it, if you're really paying attention, if you know the coaches really well and you sort of know the team stylistically well enough, that's when I do a little better when it comes to the live totals and the live lines and things like that. But man, you ask me on like a Friday before a game, oh, Browns -3. What do you think? Oh, geez, I guess I'm really bad at it. I like the money lines.
Yeah,
that's
good. That's good too. So,
by the way,
anyway,
I'll also mention player props in the NFL are way more fun than in any other sport. And this is not an ad, but if you really are going to like gamble, that StatHead site, man, you can really, drill into like who gets the targets, who get like when they get them, who's the good first quarter teams, who are the good second half teams. Like a lot of that stuff can be really valuable when you go through this. Anyway, okay. Like I said, a lot of the ones I'm throwing out are kind of long shots. They're kind of like, am I really going to bet these when the time comes? I don't know. But these are like the long shots that I have circled. And for Deshaun Watson, I think there's a couple really interesting, just some really interesting numbers here. So let's start with something that he's actually done before in his career. And when you look at most passing yards, Deshaun Watson has the same odds as Russell Wilson, Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo at plus 3,500 to have the most passing yards in the NFL, which the last time Deshaun Watson played a full season, he had the most passing yards in the NFL. So again, this all kind of goes in line with this idea of if you are bullish on the Browns, there's value. And you're bullish on the Browns because you think Deshaun Watson is that guy. And the last time Deshaun Watson played a full season, he did this exact bet that he's plus 3,500 to do. So most regular season passing yards, Deshaun Watson plus 3,500. That's actually one I might seriously consider.
Do you feel like if you're putting actual cash American dollars on it, that you need to choose between whether you think big Nick Chubb year or big Deshaun Watson year? Because I don't think there's a world where the Browns can have the leading passer in the NFL and the leading rusher in the NFL. And if they do have that, then there might be 16-1 and then just bet them to win the Super Bowl. I understand sprinkling. It's like, hey, it's 32-1. Sprinkle on that. But if you had to lean one way or another on big rushing number or big passing number, first of all, do you think you kind of need to choose? And which way would you lean if you were only going one way?
I think you do. And I was thinking about that as I said it, right? You're not gonna bet that Nick Chubb offensive player of the year bet if you think this one's gonna hit, right? You have to separate. I would choose this one. I think this one might, in a weird way, this one is harder, right? Like I can envision Nick Chubb winning the rushing title. I can see it happening. I see the path. But I'm just saying, Deshaun Watson leading the league in passing again. Again, something he's done before on a worse team with a worse offense than this one. That was after DeAndre Hopkins left. That was throwing to Brandon Cooks and Will Fuller and Jordan Akins is with the Browns now, but like that wasn't Amari Cooper and Elijah Moore and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Marquise Goodwin who can fly down the field, David Njoku. I think it's doable.
I understand that you're talking about it as a flyer, right? Big odds. I do think, is it possible that the better the Browns are, the less chance that Deshaun Watson has to lead the league in passing yards? Because their formula, is it not going to be, hey, let's get out, attack people, get a lead, and then hand the ball to Nick Chubb in the second half? If they're behind, and it's like this defense, just Jim Schwartz, I don't know, and they're just playing like games in the 30s the whole time, and it's like, well, we're down 10 the middle of the third quarter. We can't just hand it to Nick Chubb 6 straight times. I think you enhance Deshaun. Is that because like your defense, the strength of your defense affects your offensive stats. It doesn't affect how good your offense is, but it affects your offensive stats. And this happens with Ohio State a lot. Part of the reason that Dwayne Haskins broke every passing record in the book for Ohio State in 2018 was because their defense was horrible. And so Ohio State's playing Maryland, and it's a game in the 50s, and Dwayne Haskins has to be in the whole game and throwing 60 times because Ohio State couldn't stop anybody. So Ohio State's terrible defense helped Dwayne Haskins statistically, and he finished third in the Heisman. Whereas if their defense was better, he might have been out of some of those games. How do you view the Browns' defense as it relates to offensive stats?
Okay, so now you're starting to have me second guess myself, and
no. It's money though, Dan. It's real money.
But here's a point that I didn't really consider. So this is why I'm glad I ran this by you, and you're throwing this at me, because let me use Nick Sirianni as an example. If you watch the Philadelphia Eagles, what they did last year was they built big leads, and then Nick Sirianni turned these second halves. Like it felt like the second halves were like 30 minutes long. Like, that was it. It was over.
Yeah.
He milked the clock. He killed the clock. Kevin Stefanski's got a little bit of that in him too. You know, if you remember in 2020, he did that a lot. And so a guy like Patrick Mahomes, it doesn't matter how good his team is. He can lead the league in passing yards because the Kansas City Chiefs never let off the gas. They'll be up 20 points. They're going to try and win by 40. They never, Andy Reid does not stop. Kansas City doesn't turn and hand the ball off and kill the clock. The Browns do, or I think they will in those situations, a lot like Philadelphia does, a lot like Nick Sirianni does. So I think, you know, knowing the coach, knowing how he handles certain situations, knowing how he might handle a situation where you've got big leads in the second half, or you have just a lead in the second half, that's kind of a strike against this, because I think Kevin Stefanski leans more towards, we're up 14 with 20 minutes left in this game. Let's just kill it. And that's where Nick Chubb wins the rushing title. So that's actually an interesting thing to consider. That's a strike against this bet.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you can't throw a tiny little bit on it, but I do think, I think with all this stuff, Dan, you just have to, envision the season in your head and think to yourself as a Browns fan, this is how I think this is going to go. So if you really want to bet on the season, I think you have to sit down and go through the schedule. And you have to decide, this is what I really think is going to happen. And then I think you have to analyze the team and where you think their strengths are going to be, where you think their weaknesses are going to be, strategies, all these things. And once you've decided how you think the season's going to go, then make the smartest bets to maximize that. So it's July. You have plenty of time to do this, but you have to decide what their capabilities are and then what their choices are going to be about how to go about it and lean those ways. Don't be right about the team and wrong on your bets, because you're better off just being completely wrong, right? Well, I totally read that incorrectly. Whereas sometimes I'll read a game, do it, and then, you know, bet $1 here and $1 there, and then go through like, oh yeah, no, I think I won. It's like, nope, I didn't win anything because my bets were so dumb.
Okay, what was Nick to win the rushing title?
Plus 450.
See, that's interesting. But that number's not nearly as enticing as the plus 3,500. See, this is the problem.
It's not huge. Yeah, you like you want to win.
Like I said, this is all. I'm not saying that I'm actually going to bet these. I'm not predicting these are going to hit, but these are just the things that stood out to me. Like, I could make the case, much like Deshaun Watson, most passing touchdowns plus 6,500. Put $1 on that.